In this lesson, you will learn the basics of intervals. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the size and quality of an interval, distinguish between melodic and harmonic intervals, and write intervals of any size and quality above or below a given note. Simply put, an interval is the distance between two pitches. We talk about intervals in terms of their generic size, the number of scale steps they encompass, and their quality, the number of semitones they contain. We'll examine each measurement individually. When we talk about the size of an interval, we are talking about how many scale steps, or put another way, letter names, are encompassed by two notes. When you measure intervals, you always include both the starting and ending pitches in your count. On the screen, you'll see the C major scale. The distance between any two notes in this scale is an interval. The scale provides us with a useful metric for measuring these intervals. Briefly, a step is another name for a second. C to D is a step. E to F is a step. If I start on C and I count 1, 2, I end up on D. C to E is a third. If I start on C and count up 1, 2, 3, I land on E. D to F is also a third. 1, 2, 3. I want to take a few minutes and talk through all of the generic intervals that we find in the major scale. Seconds, as I mentioned, consist of adjacent letter names. You can also think of seconds as being written on a space and adjacent line, or a line and an adjacent space. A second is just another way of talking about a step. You may recall that the major scale has two different kinds of steps in it. I'll explain this in more detail in a short while. Thirds appear on adjacent spaces or adjacent lines. They skip a letter name. C to E is a third, G to B is a third, and B to D is a third. Fourths encompass four notes. They're always line space or space line. C to F is a fourth, D to G is a fourth, and so on. The slide lists all of the fourths that are found in the C major scale. Fifths appear on every other line or every other space. The slide lists all of the fifths that appear in the C major scale. Sixths encompass 6 notes. The slide lists all of the sixths present in the C major scale. Sevenths encompass, you guessed it, 7 notes. All of the sevenths in the C major scale are listed on the slide. You should also be aware of octaves and unisons. Both have the same letter name. Octaves are adjacent members of the same pitch class, like C3 and C4. And unisons are two of the same note, C4 and C4, for instance. It's worth mentioning that enharmonically equivalent pitches will change the size of the interval. While C4 to C4 is a unison, C4 to D double flat 4 is a kind of second. C to E is a third, C to F flat is a fourth. Even though they sound the same if you play them on the piano, you would push the same keys, and the size of the interval is determined only by the letter name. I mentioned a few minutes ago that there are two different kinds of step in the major scale, whole steps and half steps, or semitones. If both of these meet our definition of a second, then we need a way to distinguish between the two different sizes of second. This is where interval quality comes in. Interval quality is determined by the number of half steps an interval contains. When we were spelling scales, we spoke of whole steps and half steps. Translated into interval measurements, we call whole steps major seconds and half steps minor seconds. A major second, the bigger of the two, consists of 2 semitones. A minor second, the smaller of the two, consists of a single semitone. There are 5 common qualities of intervals: major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. At the top of the slide you can see the abbreviations for each quality. Note that we use capital letters for major, perfect, and augmented, and lowercase letters for minor and diminished. The difference between the qualities can be understood in terms of semitones. If we increase the size of a minor interval by 1 semitone, it becomes a major interval. A to C is a minor third. I can increase the distance between these notes in one of two ways. I can raise the C by a semitone to C sharp, thus creating A to C sharp, a major third, or I can lower the A by semitone to A flat, thus creating A flat C, also a major third. If you were looking closely at the equations on the previous slide, you may have noticed that there's nothing you can do to transform a major or minor interval into a perfect interval, and vice versa. These categories are mutually exclusive. Intervals can be perfect or major-minor. Any interval quality, however, can be diminished or augmented. This slide categorizes the intervals found in the major scale according to quality. Thirds are always major or minor, never perfect. Fourths are always perfect or augmented, never major or minor. It is of course possible to have something like an augmented third or a diminished octave. They are, however, rare and don't occur diatonically. Incidentally, the word diatonic means belonging to a scale or key. So when I'm talking about intervals in the C major scale, I could also say the diatonic intervals in C major. This slide classifies all of the diatonic thirds in C major. Some are major, consisting of 4 semitones. Others are minor, consisting of 3 semitones. This slide classifies all of the diatonic fifths in C major. Most of them are perfect, consisting of 7 semitones. One is diminished, consisting of 6 semitones. Let's look at some intervals in context. You'll probably recognize this passage from Schubert's Haydn-Röslein. It's the middle line of the 3. Intervals appear in 2 different ways. I've arbitrarily circled some melodic intervals in red. Melodic intervals occur when one note sounds after another note. B to D is a melodic interval, and it's ascending minor third. A to D is an ascending perfect fourth. F sharp to D is a descending major third. D to C sharp is a descending minor second. And G to C sharp is a descending diminished fifth. Intervals can also be presented harmonically, in which case both notes sound simultaneously. I have arbitrarily circled some harmonic intervals in blue. Notice that the 4th blue circle encompasses both the voice part and the left hand of the piano. Any pair of notes, regardless of where they occur, can be interpreted as an interval. The first group of notes I circled in blue actually includes 3 pitches. From the bottom up, E to A is a perfect fourth, E to C sharp is a major sixth, and A to C sharp is a major third. The second circled pair includes the perfect fourth from A up to D. While direction, ascending or descending, makes sense in the case of melodic intervals, it doesn't make quite as much sense in the case of harmonic intervals. However, it's customary to name and measure harmonic intervals from the lowest note up. The 4th circle includes an F sharp in the bass and a D in the voice. This interval is larger than an octave, it's called a compound interval, and we'll cover it in detail in the next lesson. The last blue circle also includes the notes F sharp and D, and it's a minor sixth. A word to the wise: memorize your intervals. They're the building blocks of everything we're going to do from here forward. Here's the easy way to do it. Memorize white note pairs. You only have to memorize seconds, thirds, and fourths. We'll learn in the next lesson how to derive fifths, sixths, and sevenths from them. I've put a sheet on Canvas, Dr. Berry's interval cheat sheet, to help you with this task. If you master the white note pairs, spelling intervals above or below a given note becomes a breeze. Here's why. If you're asked to write a major third above C, conceivably you could take the time to count semitones and figure it out that way. But if you know that the note pair CE is a major third, then it's taken you no time at all to arrive at the correct answer. Let's say you have a test question that asks you to write a minor third above C. If you know that CE forms a major third and that a minor third is 1/2 step smaller, just lower the E to the E flat and you have the correct answer. Notice that I didn't change the given note. If I were to raise the C to a C sharp E is also a minor third. However, the note that you're given always remains fixed. You're never to change that. If you have to write a minor third below E, you can follow the similar procedure. You know that the CE note pair is a major third. Since you can't change the E, you can raise the C to a C sharp, reducing it in size from 4 semitones to 3. C sharp is a minor third below E. By now you should be able to identify the size and quality of a given interval. You should be able to distinguish between melodic and harmonic intervals, and you should be able to write intervals of any size and quality above or below a given note. As always, if you have questions, please post them to the discussion board on Canvas, and feel free to answer questions posed by your classmates. And be sure to take the quiz before coming to class, and that will only allow you to move on to the next module. I've also put plenty of practice exercises for intervals on the Canvas site if you want to practice naming and spelling intervals.